Before refrigerators, before grocery stores, before anyone had ever heard of a freezer, people in the ancient world kept food fresh for years. Sometimes, decades, no electricity, no plastic wrap, no preservatives from a lab. Just knowledge, and that knowledge was powerful enough to keep entire families alive, through brutal winters, droughts, and hard times. In fact, some of these methods worked so well that the food lasted longer than modern canned goods do today. That's not an exaggeration, and here's what's wild. Most of us in America today are throwing away food after 3 days in the fridge. Meanwhile, our ancestors were storing it for 20 years. So what did they know that we've forgotten? Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might completely change how you look at your kitchen. This isn't just history, this is survival wisdom, and some of it is more relevant today than it's ever been. Let's start with the one food that scientists have found perfectly preserved for over 3,000 years, inside ancient tombs. You probably have it in your kitchen right now: honey, pure raw honey. Archaeologists have actually discovered honey in ancient Egyptian tombs and in desert museum collections across the American Southwest, and it was still edible. The reason honey never spoils is fascinating. It has almost zero moisture content, and it produces hydrogen peroxide naturally. Bacteria and mold simply cannot survive in it. Ancient families would coat meats, nuts, and fruits in honey to seal out air and moisture. It wasn't just a sweetener, it was a preservation system, and from a health standpoint, raw honey is packed with antioxidants. It supports wound healing, it soothes sore throats, and it's been used as medicine since before written history. Right now, most Americans buy processed honey that's been heated and filtered. It's basically sugar syrup, the real stuff. Almost nobody uses it the way they once did, but honey is just the beginning. The next food on this list was so powerful that armies carried it into battle as their only medicine, and it's sitting in your pantry right now, probably going to waste: salt, the most traded substance in the ancient world. More valuable than gold. In some regions of what is now the American South and Midwest, salt preservation, called curing, works by drawing moisture out of food. Without water, bacteria die. It's that simple. Ancient people figured this out thousands of years ago. Pioneers crossing the American Great Plains salted their beef and pork so heavily that it could survive months of travel, through heat and rain, without going bad. Salt-cured foods like jerky, salt pork, and cured fish were the original protein bars of the ancient world: lightweight, durable, and calorie-dense. Beyond preservation, salt supports electrolyte balance, nerve function, and hydration, especially critical in the days before sports drinks and IV bags. Today, Americans consume most of their salt in processed junk food, but ancient salt, unrefined sea salt or mineral salt, contains dozens of trace minerals that your body actually needs. Now let's talk about something that ancient American folk healers used. Civil War field medics used it. Even World War II military doctors relied on it when they had nothing else. Garlic. When dried or preserved in oil, garlic could last for a year or more. But what made it truly extraordinary was what it could do for the human body. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, one of nature's most powerful antimicrobial agents. Ancient people didn't know the chemistry, but they knew garlic kept them alive. During the American Civil War, Union commanders requested garlic shipments specifically to prevent wound infection and dysentery. Whole battles may have turned on garlic shipments. Modern research has confirmed what ancient people already knew. Garlic lowers blood pressure, reduces cholesterol, fights infections, and even shows anti-cancer properties in early studies. Most Americans today buy garlic powder full of additives or skip it entirely. Meanwhile, a bulb of fresh garlic, properly dried, can last months and costs almost nothing. Here's a question for you. What if I told you that one of the next foods on this list was used by Native American tribes to survive entire winters with almost nothing else? Keep watching. Dried beans and legumes. Ancient people across every continent discovered the same secret. Dry these seeds completely, seal them from moisture, and they will last for decades. Native American communities from the Southwest to the Great Lakes built their entire winter food systems around dried corn, beans, and squash. The Three Sisters. Beans are an incredibly complete food. High protein, high fiber, complex carbohydrates for sustained energy, and rich in iron and magnesium, everything a body needs to survive. Archaeologists have actually sprouted bean seeds found in ancient Pueblo sites in New Mexico. Seeds that were hundreds of years old, they still grew. In modern America, canned beans have replaced dried ones, but canned beans last 2 to 5 years. Properly dried beans, potentially 30 years or more, if sealed correctly. The next one is something colonial American housewives kept in every kitchen. Doctors used it, farmers used it, soldiers carried it, and it's making a massive comeback today. Apple cider vinegar, made by fermenting apple juice twice. First into alcohol, then into acetic acid. The result is a liquid so acidic that bacteria cannot survive in it. In colonial America, vinegar was used to pickle everything: cucumbers, beets, onions, cabbage, eggs, even pork. 1 barrel of vinegar could keep a family fed through an entire New England winter. Apple cider vinegar with the mother culture, the cloudy, unfiltered kind, contains probiotics, enzymes, and acetic acid that support digestion, blood sugar regulation, and gut health. Studies have shown it helps lower blood sugar after meals, supports weight management, and may even reduce acid reflux when used correctly. Walk into any American grocery store today, and you'll find hundreds of probiotic supplements for $30 a bottle. Or you could make apple cider vinegar at home for almost nothing. I have to pause here and tell you something. The next food on this list was so important to early American settlers that some historians believe without it, the entire colonial project might have failed. That's not hyperbole. Fermented vegetables, specifically lactofermentation, the process of letting naturally occurring bacteria on vegetables, transform the food into something that can last for months, without any heat, without any cooking. Early American colonists learned fermentation from both European traditions and Native American food practices. Sauerkraut, fermented corn, and pickled vegetables were survival staples. The process works by creating lactic acid, the same compound that makes yogurt sour. This acid kills harmful bacteria while preserving every nutrient in the vegetable. Here's what's stunning. Fermented vegetables can actually have more nutrients than raw vegetables. The fermentation process creates B vitamins and makes minerals more bioavailable. The probiotics in fermented foods are linked to better digestion, stronger immune function, reduced anxiety, and even improved mood through the gut-brain connection. Right now in America, we're spending billions on gut health products. Meanwhile, a head of cabbage and a jar of salt can do more for your microbiome than most supplements on the market. Let's talk about the pharmacy of the ancient world. Before CVS, before prescription pads, before insurance copays, there was the herb garden, dried herbs. When properly dried and sealed from light and moisture, medicinal herbs can retain their active compounds for years. Some cultures preserved specific herb blends. For emergency use, elderberry, echinacea, chamomile, yarrow, and St. John's wort were all used by Native American and early colonial healers for everything from fever to infection to wound care. Elderberry in particular has impressive modern research behind it. Multiple clinical studies show it significantly reduces the duration and severity of colds and flu. Every winter, American families spend hundreds on NyQuil, Dayquil, and cold medicine. Many of those ingredients were originally derived from the same plants people dried and stored for centuries. The knowledge of which plants to dry, how to store them, and how to use them, that knowledge almost disappeared, but it's coming back. You're halfway through, and I need to ask you something. Have you ever wondered why your grandparents or great-grandparents seem to get sick less often? Why they were tougher, more resilient? Keep watching. The answer is coming. This next one is going to surprise you, especially if you've been told your whole life that fat is the enemy. Rendered animal fat, lard, tallow, duck fat. This was one of the most important preservation tools in human history. When you submerge cooked meat in its own rendered fat, it creates an airtight seal. This technique, called confit, allowed people to store cooked meat for months without refrigeration. French settlers brought it to Louisiana. Native Americans had their own versions. Lard is almost entirely monounsaturated fat, the same type found in olive oil. It's stable at high temperatures and doesn't oxidize the way vegetable oils do. For generations, American farm families cooked everything in lard. Then in the 1950s, the vegetable oil industry changed everything. We replaced one of our most nutritious fats with something our bodies barely recognize. Let's get into something that any American who's ever been to a southern barbecue joint already has a deep respect for: smoking meat and fish. One of the oldest and most effective preservation methods ever discovered. The smoke does three things simultaneously. It dries the surface, coats it with antimicrobial compounds, and drives out oxygen. Native American tribes across the continent smoked salmon, buffalo, venison, and turkey. Some smoked meats were traded across hundreds of miles and lasted for months. The phenols in wood smoke, particularly from hickory, apple, cherry, and mesquite, are natural antibacterial and antifungal agents. This is not folk wisdom, this is chemistry. Smoked foods also concentrate their nutrients, Smoked salmon, for example, becomes a nutrient-dense source of omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and complete protein. In a shelf-stable form, American barbecue culture is one of the last places where this ancient preservation wisdom is still honored. Every pitmaster in Texas, Tennessee, and the Carolinas is practicing a 10,000-year-old tradition. What I'm about to share next stopped me cold when I first learned it. There's a food that was so universally preserved across ancient cultures on every continent. From the Americas to Asia to Africa, that historians call it the original superfood, and you can buy it right now for about $2. Dried mushrooms, from wild porcini in Appalachian forests, to shiitake in Asian American communities, to morels in the Midwest. Ancient people dried mushrooms and used them all winter long. When you dry a mushroom, something remarkable happens. Compounds called beta-glucans become more concentrated. These are among the most powerful immune-modulating substances found in any food. Dried mushrooms reconstitute perfectly in hot water or broth. A handful of dried porcini turns a simple soup into something extraordinary. They last for years when stored properly. Modern research on medicinal mushrooms, lion's mane, raishi, turkey tail, chaga, is exploding. But many of these species were dried and stored by Native American healers, long before any clinical trial. In America today, mushroom supplements are a billion-dollar industry. And yet a bag of dried shiitake mushrooms at the grocery store, containing the exact same compounds, costs $2 and lasts a year. Now we're getting into territory that every American kid grew up with. But almost no one understands the ancient wisdom behind fermented dairy, cheese, yogurt, kefir, cultured butter. These weren't invented for flavor. They were invented for survival. Milk spoils in hours. Fermented milk lasts for years. Hard cheeses like cheddar, parmesan, and Gouda were specifically designed for long-term storage. A properly waxed parmesan wheel can age for 3 years or more, and only gets better. The probiotics in fermented dairy, particularly yogurt and kefir, support a healthy gut microbiome, strengthen the immune system, and improve the absorption of calcium and other minerals. Traditional American pioneer families made their own butter, cultured their own milk, aged their own cheese in root cellars. That knowledge has been almost completely replaced by supermarket dependence. We're almost at the end. And I've saved one of the most powerful for last. It's something most Americans toss in the trash without a second thought, but our ancestors knew its true value: seeds and nuts, when dried and stored in cool, dark conditions. Many seeds and nuts can last for years, even decades. Nature designed them this way. Native American cultures across the continent developed sophisticated seed storage systems, sealed clay pots, underground caches, woven baskets lined with clay. Seeds were currency and survival. In one, sunflower seeds, native to the Americas, were one of the most important caloric sources for plains tribes, high in fat, protein, and vitamin E. Shelf-stable for years, nuts like pecans, black walnuts, and chestnuts fed families through hard winters across the American South and Appalachian regions. Many indigenous communities had complex trading systems built around nut harvests. Today, most Americans eat roasted, salted, oil-coated nuts from a can. Raw, dried, properly stored nuts are a completely different nutritional experience, and they last infinitely longer. Let's talk about the technology that made all of this possible, because ancient people didn't just know what to preserve, they knew exactly how to store it. The root cellar, a room dug into the earth, typically 4 to 8 feet underground, where temperature stays between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, and humidity stays high. Before refrigeration, every American farmstead had one. Root cellars stored potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets, apples, cabbages, and canned goods through every winter. The earth itself becomes the refrigerator. No electricity, no moving parts, no monthly utility bill. Just a hole in the ground, with remarkable engineering behind it. Incredibly, root cellars are making a comeback in the American homesteading movement. People who lost their power during hurricanes, ice storms, or grid failures rediscovered this ancient wisdom out of necessity. And then there were the containers. Ancient people understood something that took modern food science centuries to rediscover. Oxygen is the enemy of preserved food. Clay pots sealed with beeswax, animal fat, or pine resin created near-perfect anaerobic environments. No oxygen means no bacterial growth. No bacterial growth means no spoilage. Many ancient American cultures also used large underground grain silos, pits lined with bark or clay, sealed with a wooden cap covered in soil. Corn and grain stored this way could last for 10 to 20 years. This principle is exactly what modern food preservation science uses today. Vacuum sealing, Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, nitrogen flushing, different technology, same ancient principle. Think about this. Every single technique we've talked about, honey, salt, fermentation, drying, smoking, root cellars, was figured out by people with no chemistry degrees, no laboratories, no internet. They learned through observation, through failure, and through passed down knowledge. Generation after generation, they refined these methods until they worked perfectly. And then, we forgot most of it in about 50 years. There's one more category that rarely gets talked about. Fermented beverages, not alcohol, preservation drinks, switchel, shrubs, herbal kvass. These were how ancient Americans preserved fruit and herb nutrition through winter. Apple shrub, made from apple cider vinegar, raw apple juice, and herbs, was carried by American colonists and soldiers as a preserved health drink. It could last for months in a barrel. These drinks delivered probiotics, vitamins, minerals, and hydration in a form that could survive months of storage. They were the Gatorade and vitamin water of the ancient world. In America today, the craft beverage movement is rediscovering shrubs, fire cider, and herbal tonics. But what they're calling artisan and small batch is just what everyone used to call Tuesday. And finally, the food that might be the single greatest preservation achievement in all of human history. Native American tribes perfected this. Trappers and explorers relied on it. It kept men alive on expeditions that lasted years. Pemmican, made from dried meat, rendered fat, and dried berries, pounded together and packed into animal skin pouches. This combination could last for years at room temperature, decades, when stored properly. Pemmican provided complete nutrition. Protein, fat, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals in a compact, shelf-stable package. Lewis and Clark brought it on their entire journey across the continent. Modern freeze-dried survival foods are trying to replicate what pemmican already perfected 2,000 years ago, and pemmican requires nothing but meat, fat, and time. Here's what all of this means for us today. We live in a world of abundance, and yet we're somehow more vulnerable to food insecurity than our ancestors ever were. One power outage, one supply chain disruption, and suddenly, we don't know how to eat without a grocery store. Our ancestors didn't have more resources, they just had more knowledge. And that knowledge, honey that outlives civilizations, salt that feeds armies, fermentation that heals gut and soul, that knowledge is still here, it never left. We just stopped paying attention. Maybe it's time to start again.